Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. Part 2, June of 1958. This is Chapter 4, Ben Hanscom takes a fall. And he has left the bar with Ricky Lee and the Wild Turkey in a beer stein. And he has boarded a plane. He's flying to Derry, Maine. There's a lot of turbulence, there's a big storm. Ben falls asleep and he dreams about the last day of school, 1958. He's in a classroom with Beverly Marsh. He has a crush on her. We find out that he secretly likes her, but he's afraid to say anything because he is overweight. So he is, even though Beverly comes from the wrong side of town and the popular girls don't like her, he still feels like he is not able to win her over. He even says, quote, he thought fat boys were probably only allowed to love pretty girls inside. Page 162. And we'll find out that Beverly is nothing but nice to Ben, so that's very endearing. I really have always rooted for them, and I don't know, I really always wanted them to be together. So Ben is in a classroom with Henry Bowers, who's already been held back once. Henry asked to cheat at one point, and Ben said, no, you can't, because he's thinking, we're both going to get in trouble. And Henry gets not held back this time, but he has to do summer school, and it's pretty much Ben's fault, according to Henry, because if he had been able to cheat, he would have been able to pass, and therefore he would have, been okay. Ben gets out before Henry because Henry has to be talked to by the teacher, so that gives him a little extra time, and he goes to the library. He describes the library much the same that I would have described a library when I was a kid. I just have always loved them, always had great times in the libraries of my past, and he goes over that himself, and I just can relate to Ben so much when it comes to love of books and learning and being. He's also very solitary, which I've always been very wrapped up in my own life and my own, not even world, but I've always chosen quality of friendship over quantity, and I'm an introvert, so I just need tons of time alone. And to me, it's not lonely, and to Ben, it's not lonely. So I just have very strong ties to Ben. In the library is a sign, and it says, remember the curfew, and it's posted by the Derry police. The curfew is at 7 p.m. And this was instated because we've had 5 murders that they know about. So it started with Georgie, then Betty Ripsum, who was 13 years old, Cheryl LaMonica, who was 16, Matthew Clements, 3 years old, and Veronica Grogan. She died at 9, she was just about to turn 10. So Ben's mom insists that he be home at 6 o'clock every day. And she said, if you're not here, I'm going to call the cops. So you need to make sure you're here and I don't overreact and call the police. And she buys him a watch. She has him wear it. He promises that he'll be home. She asks him, she has a very honest talk with him, which I really appreciate about, there are people who are getting murdered. They think it could be a sexual predator. They're not sure. Regardless, it's someone who is unhinged, and you need to be aware of yourself. You need to have unagi. And she asks Ben if he's seen anything weird, and he hesitates, but he's also rationalizing in his brain. He's thinking, well, if I tell her the thing that I saw, which is intriguing, and we won't find out until a little bit later, if she finds out the thing that I saw in January, she is going to overreact, and I will not have a 6 p.m. curfew. I will have a straight after school curfew, and I will never be allowed out. So then Ben snaps out of his daydream, and he writes a haiku to Beverly and mails it anonymously. And he partially hopes that she finds out and reciprocates his feelings, but he also kind of doesn't want her to know. It's like a I do, but I don't. I'm sure we've all heard the haiku, but it is, "Your hair is winter fire, January embers, my heart burns there too." Page 182. And I think it's just a sweet little haiku, and I wonder how long it took Stephen King to come up with that. So Ben leaves the library with his books. He's daydreaming about Beverly. He's walking along the sidewalk, and there's a fence. The barrens are to the side of him, and the barrens are just this wild, overgrown place with just tons of vegetation, sticks, brush, trees, like weedy trees, not, normal wooded forest trees. And the sewer, I don't know what you call them, the things that like stick up out of the ground, those are down there. There's the river runs through down there, and there are bugs, and it's not a place that he thought to play. And so Henry catches up with him. He has Belch and Victor hold Ben against the fence, and he proceeds to take out a switchblade, and he starts carving his name into Ben's stomach. So he starts carving, and Ben realizes that he needs to get away. The boys who were holding him have stopped because this has just escalated to a level that they were not expecting, but they're also not willing to stop Henry. So Ben kind of pushes forward, has Henry throw him back against the rail, and as he does that, he shoves himself against Henry and propels himself backwards. So he goes over the embankment, and he rolls down, he escapes, but he is just messed up. His, let alone the blood and all the stuff from the knife carving, but now he's rolled down an embankment and hit trees and branches and thorns, and he's a mess, bloody. He hurt his leg, I think his ankle, and he's still being pursued. So Henry comes, the other boys come, there's a tussle with Henry. Henry ends up out of sight somewhere down below, and when Ben gets down there, he sees Henry laying in a stream, and he's just looking rather dead. He goes over and Henry grabs him. So then they start fighting again, and Ben is now just pissed off because he was having a great day. It's the last day of school. His library books have been ruined. He kicks Henry in the balls. The other boys show up and start throwing rocks, and Ben runs away. So he gets quite far. He hears voices from other children, and he goes away from them because he doesn't want to lead the bigger bullies toward these kids who are, just innocently playing. And he finds this part of the embankment where there's a big tree sticking out and its roots are exposed, and it's making like a little cave underneath the embankment. So he goes and hides under there. And while he's under there, he falls asleep and dreams about what happened the previous January. So January of 1958. So it's kind of trippy because Ben is on a plane in 1985 heading back to Derry, Maine, and on the plane he falls asleep and is dreaming about June 1958, and in his dream of June of 1958 he is dreaming of January of 1958. So that whole thing, I love little things like that. I love little details like that. So he is asleep on a plane dreaming and dreaming in a dream. Ben got out of school late. He stayed after to help the teacher, and it got later than even she realized. By the time they were done, there was no one around. It's almost 5 o'clock. She's waiting for a ride to pick her up. It's a terrible day. It's snowy and windy, icy. Poor Ben is going to have to worry about frostbite, but he says, I only live a mile away. I'm just going to go home. And the teacher's like, well, I could have my husband drop you off if you just wait around. And he's like, no, I'll just go. So he's walking home alone, there's no one out, and he sees a clown out in the canal. Just hanging out. Its head is hidden, he's got a whole bunch of balloons, and despite the crazy wind, the balloons are going toward Ben, into the wind. These balloons are just floating there. And he's intrigued, kind of mesmerized by it, and the clown is talking to him, and he is kind of getting lulled into a false sense of security. And all of a sudden the town whistle blows at 5 o'clock, and the clown raises its head, and it's the mummy from the horror movie The Mummy, which terrifies Ben. He does not like that mummy, it scares him. And the clown mummy starts advancing on him rapidly. All of a sudden it's right in front of him, which it shouldn't have been. It was quite far away to begin with. And it's like reaching up at Ben, and he tears off. He runs home. He is so petrified. So that's the weird thing that happened in January. Ben, he wakes up from this dream within his dream. So now we're back in June of 1958, and he has assessed that it's probably okay to get out. He gets out, he meets Bill and Eddie. They are building a dam, and Eddie has had an asthma attack but has run out of medication in his inhaler. Then we go to chapter 5, Bill Denbrough Beats the Devil 1. So Bill is on his own trip to Derry. He's on a plane from England, and he's remembering his old bike, Silver. He named it Silver after the Lone Ranger's horse, and it's a huge Schwinn, 28 inches I think they said, and it's way too big for him. There's some talk of him kind of being reckless after Georgie's death and kind of courting death in a way of his own, being a little daredevil-y. So Bill leaves Ben with Eddie to watch him, and he goes to the drugstore to get a refill of the inhaler. He goes through some rather harrowing traffic and almost gets flattened. Mr. Keene, the druggist, listens to the story. He's like, oh, here, let me just give you this inhaler to give to Eddie, and I'll put it on his mom's tab. And we find out that what is inside the inhaler is hydroxamist, which is just hydrogen, oxygen, and some like medicinal flavoring. So basically it's just a placebo for Eddie, and he is charging Eddie's mom for it. And apparently it's working. So Bill returns, Eddie is doing a little better. He takes his inhaler and takes a pull off of it, and the three of them just kind of start talking about stuff and kind of introducing themselves, because Ben knew them a little bit by sight and they knew him by sight, but they didn't really know each other. Quote, a silence fell amid the three of them. It was not an entirely uncomfortable silence. In it they became friends. Page 226. They agree to meet up and construct the dam the next day, and they part ways, and everyone's just happy. Bill goes home, and he's having a hard time with George's death, and his parents are having a hard time, but they aren't helping him through anything. So there's just this almost abandonment that Bill is going through because his parents are checked out, and I feel really sorry for him. That's got to be a horrible position to be put in. And yeah, that's such a heavy thing for a child to have to deal with, you know, the loss of a brother, and then the parents have become withdrawn and are not giving you what you need to move on. And so Bill kind of spends a lot of time now just doing what he wants, not really being paid attention to. Some of the stuff, like with Silver, might be a cry for help. So then we find out that Bill had an experience that was creepy, just like Ben's experience with the mummy clown. He had been in George's room, and he goes in there on occasion to be closer to George, but also when he's in there, his imagination runs away with him, and he starts imagining like Georgie in the closet, a bloody mess, and, you know, coming to get him. Quote, Warring with his terror of George the ghost was a mute and grasping need, a hunger to somehow get over George's death and find a decent way to go on. Not to forget George, but somehow to find a way to make him not so fucking gruesome. He understood that his parents were not succeeding very well with that, and if he was going to do it for himself, he would have to do it by himself. 234. So George has this photo album. Bill takes it down, and he's looking through it. He gets to the last page, which is George's last school photo. It's taken right before he died. And the photo winks at him. He freaks out, throws it against a wall, it falls open, and the pages start flipping back to that school photo. And then the photo starts bleeding, and the blood starts falling onto the floor, and Bill freaks out, slams the door, and leaves. Have a spooky day.